Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Landlord Ambassador Program information session. We're going to wait a couple more minutes and wait for some other folks to join, and we'll get started shortly. For folks who are just joining now, we're going to wait another 2 minutes or so to make sure that everybody who registered has a chance to log in. If you have any questions or if there are any technical difficulties, feel free to type a question into the chat box and we'll try to respond as quickly as possible. one more minute and we'll get started. All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for waiting a couple minutes to let some other folks join in. We're about to get started on the Landlord Ambassador Program owner information session. If you received a mailing from us over the past couple weeks, you probably got a link to join this information session. So we're going to take a little bit of time to go over the Landlord Ambassador Program and try to answer any questions that might pop up. So the agenda for today's information session, we're going to do a quick round of introductions for the folks who are acting as the panelists today. We'll do a little background on the program, how it began, how it's evolved over time, and what the goals of the program are. We'll go through the type of assistance that the Landlord Ambassador will provide to enrolled property owners, talk about the timeline for the program, what our next steps are, what property owners' next steps are, and then we can do some questions and answers through the chat box. So I'll start off with introductions. My name is Adam Phillips. I am the Deputy Director of the Green Housing Preservation Loan Program and the Multifamily Housing Preservation Loan Program at HPD in the Division of Preservation Finance. And I'm one of a couple staff members that helps to administer the Landlord Ambassador Program on HPD side.
Hi, everyone. I'm Thomas Abbott. I'm a Senior Project Manager at HPD and another of the staff members that helps run the Landlord Ambassador Program from HPD's end.
I'm Roxanne Maduro. I'm a project manager for Many Management. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer, and we serve as one of the development consultants for landlords that enroll in the Landlord Ambassador Program.
Great. So we're going to talk now just a little bit about the background of the Landlord Ambassador Program. Back in 2017, HPD partnered with Enterprise Community Partners to create a Landlord Ambassadors Program, pilot program. The impetus of the pilot program came from conversations with small multifamily building owners, tenant and property owner advocacy groups. And what came out of the conversations was a need to help property owners navigate the myriad city agencies that they might encounter from purchasing, owning, and maintaining a multifamily building with a focus on smaller landlords. We know that at least Thomas and I on our end, we work in the preservation finance department at HPD, so we work with property owners to close on financing to do renovations or rehabs of their property. And we know that our process can be a little bit difficult, can be a little bit time consuming. So we wanted to make sure that there was a way for property owners to get through our loan closing process as quickly as possible, and with the type of assistance that a not-for-profit who has the property owner's interest at heart, you know, they can do some of the hand-holding and kind of the negotiating to get through our loan closing process. So the goal was to provide intensive technical assistance to property owners experiencing physical and or financial distress in their properties. So when we first did outreach to property owners back in 2017, we focused mainly on property owners that were subject to the tax lien sale and had some sort of physical, financial, or operational problem with their building. And what came out of the pilot program was that oftentimes property owners are experiencing two of the three, major cyclical issues in a building. For example, A property owner might not be able to pay their property taxes or their water and sewer bill because they have a vacant unit. The vacant unit is the result of, repairs that haven't been done for quite some time. So the unit isn't in lease-up condition. And if they don't have the money, if they don't have income generating from that unit, they can't pay their property tax arrears. They can't pay their water and sewer arrears. They don't have any cash left over to make the repairs to that unit, to lease it up, to increase their income. So what we saw was a lot of the property owners that were subject to the tax lien sale had these cyclical issues. And if one issue started, then it usually led to another, and it was a compounding problem and kind of a downward spiral. So what we wanted to do was pair a not-for-profit that has experience managing properties, owning properties, to step in and to help the property owner diagnose the problem and create a kind of immediate solution to stop the downward spiral, if you will, and then put the property owner onto a path to success. Initially in the pilot program, property owners that met our criteria and were subject to the tax lien sale in 2017, 2018, and 2019 were enrolled in the program as long as the property owner sent us an enrollment form. And in some circumstances, HPD made referrals to buildings that were in our development pipeline where the property owner was getting ready to close on a loan, or if the individual ambassador had come across a property owner through word of mouth, through a local elected official that needed assistance. As part of the pilot program, there were 3 main steps that the property owners had to take, kind of 3 overarching goals for the program. When the property owner enrolled, they were required to properly register their property with HPD. HPD has an annual registration process for buildings that are 3 units or larger, where the property owner needs to register the property, and if there's an applicable managing agent, they must also be listed on the property registration. And that's really important because any official communication from HPD will go to whoever is listed on that annual registration. So we realized there were a fair amount of property owners that came into the program that didn't have their property properly registered. So one of the baseline expectations that we set was that the property owner had to register their property properly with HPD. Another condition of working with the landlord ambassadors, they made a commitment to remove 80% of the existing HPD B and C violations. Typically, these violations were either older violations where the property owner had already cured the violating condition and just paperwork had to be submitted to remove them from HPD's record. But there were also property owners enrolled who didn't have the capital or didn't have the wherewithal or the knowledge to fix the underlying condition, meaning curing the condition and then submitting the paperwork to have the violation removed. Lastly, the third condition of the program was that the property owners would agree to enter into a DOF or DEP payment agreement or develop a plan to become current on the property tax or water and sewer arrears. The pilot program ran from 2017, 2018, and into 2019. And because of the success of the pilot program, we were actually allowed to continue the pilot as a demonstration program, and we're currently in our 4th year of the Landlord Ambassador program. So we can talk a couple minutes now just who is the Landlord Ambassador. Roxanne, if you want to jump in here and just give a little plug for who Manny is and what you do as part of being the Landlord Ambassador.
Sure. So like I said, we're a nonprofit affordable housing developer, and our services are completely free of charge. Basically, once we're connected to the landlord, we help them navigate through the process of correcting any physical, operational, or financial instability they have in their property. So that may mean getting loans for any repairs that may need to be done, getting loans for arrears as well. If they have any vacant units, we help navigate them through the process of getting that repaired through a grant that gives them up to $10,000 per unit, and getting people housed in there. And usually those residents will have vouchers that will help pay off their housing. So we basically will be your main point of contact once you enroll in the program, and we'll help navigate you through any questions you have regarding your property, regarding next steps to helping it become stable and financially and operationally. So that is basically our role in all of this.
Great. Thanks, Roxanne. So now we'll go into a little bit more detail in what Roxanne shared with what type of technical assistance Manny will provide as the landlord ambassador. So like Roxanne mentioned, they will work with property owners to improve financial, physical, and operational conditions of your properties by providing technical assistance and assisting with vacant unit repairs. All technical assistance through this program is free of charge. So in more detail, the technical assistance that Manny provides begins with a property inspection and a physical assessment of the property. This is a little bit trickier now due to COVID-19, and Manny has done a really great job of working with property owners to make sure that everybody's complying with social distancing guidelines. But typically what the ambassador will do is schedule an inspection of the property and do like a roof to cellar walkthrough of the building just to check the basic conditions. At this time, the property owner can bring up any physical issues that they've had over a long or short term, and Manny can work on the intake and assessment of the property and highlight any issues at that time. The next step, once the inspection and the initial assessment is completed, is Manny, as the landlord ambassador, will create a short-term stabilization plan to address any emergency or immediate issues. So we call that short-term phase as a stop the bleeding. A lot of times property owners have a lot of unpaid bills. They might have property tax arrears, mortgage arrears. So we want to make sure there's an immediate infusion of funds if necessary. Immediate repairs are made at the property if necessary. But some sort of short-term stopping the bleeding stabilization plan. And after that's implemented, or while that's being implemented, the landlord ambassador will also work on a long-term strategy to make sure that the property owner reaches financial and operational stability. That might include, so some short-term and long-term strategies might include, in the short term, getting a low interest rate loan to pay off the property tax arrears. And the longer term strategy might be to refinance all of the building's outstanding debt and make moderate repairs to the property and hire a property manager. You know, that's just an example of what we've seen other buildings coming through the program have a short-term solution and a longer-term strategy to get to stability. Some other assistance provided through the landlord ambassador is curing violating conditions and removal of violations. These include HPD code enforcement violations, but also Environmental Control Board, ECB violations, and violations that are issued by the Department of Buildings. With any agency, you have to first correct or cure the underlying condition and then submit paperwork to the relevant agency saying that that condition has been cured, and only then will the violation come off the property. Manny will help you every step of the way by curing the violating condition and working with you to submit the correct paperwork to the correct agency so violations are removed from your property. They'll also help to enter payment plans for existing municipal arrears. So those include outstanding property taxes, water and sewer arrears, any penalties that result from ECB or DOB violations. Manny can also identify third-party consultants. So if you're a property owner that's been enrolled and you've had a really bad experience with a contractor in the past, Manny, as a not-for-profit developer and owner and property manager, has a deep bench of qualified third-party consultants that they've worked with for years and that they trust. So they can recommend to you a general contractor, an architect, an engineer, an attorney that has your best interest at heart. Manny will also help you access financial resources. They will work with you to complete loan applications and work with you throughout the loan closing process to make sure that you are fully aware of the terms and conditions of the financial product that you're entering into. Through this program, we also have, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, we also have some special funds set aside for property owners that are enrolled, and Manny will kind of act as the owner's representative when dealing with those financial institutions. Lastly, Manny will also train property owners who are enrolled in multifamily building best practices. And that's a pretty broad topic, but what that can cover is things as small as creating a rent roll for your residents in the building and ensuring that every resident or tenant has a lease, all the way up to understanding HPD's processes and basic property management best practices. So part of I mentioned just a minute ago that we have some, special financing programs for property owners that are enrolled in the program, in the Landlord Ambassador program. And part of the program is an opportunity for property owners to make repairs in vacant units in the building. So part of the vacant unit repairs assistance that's provided is that Manny will work with you to identify vacant units in your building and work with pre-approved contractors to develop scopes of work to make repairs in individual units and common areas as necessary. The repairs are completed at no cost to the enrolled property owners, and the repairs, the money that comes for the repairs, it's no conditions money, basically. So what we mean by that is once a scope of work is developed to make the repairs in a vacant unit, the contractor that does the work is paid directly. So the property owner doesn't touch the money. You won't have access to these funds. The scope of work is developed by Manny and the pre-qualified general contractor. You as the property owner review and agree to the scope of work that's developed. And once it's approved by HPD, we will pay the contractor directly, and the repairs will be made in the building. It's not structured as a loan. There's no lien recorded against the property. It's just money goes directly to the repairs, and that's it. Once the repairs are completed, Manny will work to identify eligible tenants and teach owners basic tenant screening and lease up best practices. So, you make sure you're getting a tenant that understands that they have to pay rent every month, and you as the owner can understand how to identify tenants and what questions to ask when you do a lease up of a new unit or of a vacant unit. In addition to the vacant unit repair program, property owners that are enrolled in this program have special access to an emergency flexible financing fund. It's a special loan program that we created to work in conjunction with the Landlord Ambassador program. A lot of times property owners that enroll in the program don't have access to traditional sources of financing. So we wanted to make sure that as a way to stop the bleeding and to get building owners back on a stable path, is that we create a loan program with really low interest rates for property owners to get that short-term infusion of cash to stabilize the property. We are still working out some of the details of that loan fund, but we should be launching it shortly, and we'll have a term sheet for property owners to review, so you know exactly what the eligible uses are for the loan funds and how the low interest rate loan fund is structured. Just one note on the loan fund and the vacant unit repairs. Typically, what we see on the vacant unit repair side, it costs no more than $10,000 or so to turn over a unit to make it leasable. Every property owner and every unit is different. So that's just an average number that we work with. Some will come in much lower, some will come in a little bit higher. In terms of the emergency loan fund, we'll see, or what we estimate is for property owners who apply will get about $35,000 on average per building to stabilize. And that can be used to do larger emergency repairs or enter into a payment agreement with the Department of Finance for municipal arrears, or to completely pay off those municipal arrears. So now we're going to go through just two examples of the assistance provided. These are two property owners that came through the Landlord Ambassador program during the pilot phase. So the first one is a Brooklyn property owner. So this specific property owner had inherited their building from their parents. It's a 5-unit building, and it's a really small building. And because of the small size and the low rents, it was really hard for the property owner to cover rising utility costs and ongoing maintenance expenses. As a result, there was some deferred maintenance, which turned into larger emergency repairs, and the property owner ended up needing a larger capital improvement loan from HPD. So the Landlord Ambassador helped the property owner learn and implement some basic property management best practices, and worked with the property owner to get to a loan closing with HPD. They were able to finance major capital improvements through this program. And as a result of receiving low interest rate financing from HPD for the major capital improvements, they entered into a regulatory agreement with the city that preserves the existing affordability in the building for 30 years, which is the same term as the loan. Another property owner in the Bronx, a similar story, had inherited a building. This was a 6-unit property, and just because of lack of management over the year, they had accumulated a lot of property violations and water and sewer and property tax arrears. The owner didn't have any capital to enter into a payment agreement with the Department of Finance or the Department of Environmental Protection to pay off the property tax arrears or the water and sewer arrears. Once the owner started working with the Landlord Ambassador, they were able to start to clear violations in the building. This was one case where the property owner had actually cured some of the violations, but really just wasn't sure how to clear them and how to go to which agency issued the violation and how to make sure that his record was clean. So the Landlord Ambassador worked with the owner to clear some of the violations, increase the cash flow of the property to start addressing the property tax arrears. And they actually hired a property manager who made repairs in the building and started to address maintenance issues as they popped up. Some repairs that would pop up regularly, address them immediately so they didn't become long-term capital improvement needs. The property stabilized through this program, and once the property stabilized, they started to work on a longer-term capital improvement plan for the building. So we have a number of expectations for property owners that are enrolling in the program. Manny does a great job of working with property owners, but we want to make sure that there is an open dialogue going on between Manny as the Landlord Ambassador and the property owner that's enrolled. It's really a collaboration between the landlord ambassador and the property owner to come up with a stabilization and an implementation plan for your property. We want to make sure that property owners are sharing information on building income and expenses. So that means if you have an existing rent roll, if you have existing leases, if you don't have, an income tracking system, Manny will help you to create that. But we want to make sure that property owners are sharing as much information as possible. If there's any existing debt on the property, like a mortgage with a lender, if there's an unsecured mortgage with an individual, all that information needs to come to the landlord ambassador, to Manny, to make sure that they have a complete view of how the property is operating, what kind of conditions the property is up against, and that will inform them on the plan that they create with you to get to stability. We also want property owners to provide access to your property to the landlord ambassador as requested. This is a little bit trickier during COVID-19 times, and we want to make sure that we're practicing social distancing guidelines. But if you do have vacant units in the property, you have to provide access to those vacant units so the contractor can come in and develop a scope of work and then eventually do the work to make the repairs in the vacant units. If there are larger capital needs, the landlord ambassador will have to come more than once to the property, sometimes with a third-party consultant to do an assessment to develop a scope of work for the larger capital improvements. So we just want to make sure that access is provided as needed. And lastly, communication is key here. We want to make sure that you have an open line of communication to your landlord ambassador, that you agree on regular check-ins if necessary. We just want to make sure that it's a two-way street and it's a two-way dialogue, and that you're responding to the landlord ambassador in a regular fashion and in a timely manner. We want to make sure that everybody is coming into this with the correct expectations of what we can achieve, and I think keeping communication as open as possible is a great way to get there. So we're coming up against a couple of deadlines here. The deadline to enroll in the Landlord Ambassador program is August 17th, 2020. I believe that's next Tuesday. The program will launch for newly enrolled property owners on September 1st. So that means sometime between August 17th and September 1st, you'll get a notice from Manny as the landlord ambassador, officially introducing themselves and talking about immediate next steps for the two of you to work on together. So just as a reminder, the enrollment forms need to be submitted to HPD by August 17th. The enrollment form needs to be filled out as completely as possible and legibly, please. And that goes to the hpdlap@hpd.nyc.gov email address. After the August 17th enrollment due date, you will receive a notice from HPD and Manny officially welcoming you to the program, and you'll get started working with Manny as the landlord ambassador on September 1st. Once you start working with Manny as the landlord ambassador, you'll have until June 30th, 2021 to make some significant improvements on your implementation plan. We have funding secured for the Landlord Ambassador program through June 30th, 2021. In the past, we've been able to extend the program, and ideally, we'll continue to extend the program for at least 1 to 2 to 3 more years. But as of now, we would like to see as much progress made with property owners through June 30th, 2021. Like I mentioned before, the next steps: return the legible and filled out property enrollment form by August 17th to hpdlap@hpd.nyc.gov. We've updated the website for the Landlord Ambassador program. We've included the link here. And we also have a hotline with HPD if you have any enrollment questions. That number is 646-588-8847. Any questions relating directly to how Manny as the landlord ambassador will work with enrolled property owners, you can contact Manny directly. The two main points of contact are Roxanne, who's on the call today, and who introduced herself and talked about Manny as an organization and the free services they provide. And Jason Manning is also working for Manny on the Landlord Ambassador program. And if there are any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box. We will save this presentation as a handout, and we'll also upload it to our website so you can refer back to this in the future. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the questions box and we can answer them the best we can. I'm going to go on mute for a moment while I move this presentation into the handout section here. And again, if you have questions, please type them into the question section. Okay, so the presentation should be into the handout section right now. So there's a PDF version of what we went over today for you to refer back to. Not seeing any questions just yet. Oh, here we go. Great. So the first question we have here is, we have a non-paying tenant for over a year that refuses to leave. Due to COVID, court dates were postponed. Would they be able to help with that? So that's a great question. And yes, so Manny, as the Landlord Ambassador program, will help property owners with property management best practices. And this is part of that. So Manny will work with you in a way where you can deal with the tenant in a responsible way. Sometimes some of these residents are eligible for what are called one-shot deals, where they can become current in their arrears. Manny has a number of strategies to work with residents that are non-paying, so they will absolutely be able to help you with a strategy with that resident. And another question we have here is, can you speak more about the resources available to enter into DOF, DEP payment arrangements for arrears? That's a really good question. So a fair amount of property owners who come into the Landlord Ambassador program don't have the resources to enter into a payment plan. That's part of the reason why we created the Flexible Financing Emergency Fund. So if you don't have the funds to enter into a payment plan, Manny will work with you to look at your current income and expenses of the property, work with you to reduce expenses if necessary through property management best practices to free up additional cash flow to pay off the payment plan. If you don't have any funds to put a down payment on the payment plan, the Flexible Financing Fund is available for property owners to make a significant down payment so you can sustainably pay back the payment plan. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions. Just wait maybe another minute if folks want to ask another question. All right. If there are no more questions, Thomas and Roxanne, do you have anything to add before we close out the information session?
Nope. Thanks everyone for attending. And yeah, if this is something that appeals to you, send in that enrollment form before the 17th.
Well, actually, it looks like we have a couple more questions coming in, so we can stay on for another couple minutes. So there's a question, will this webinar be uploaded in its entirety on the site? And yes, we plan on uploading what we shared in the handouts, and ideally a recorded version of this, so you can refer back to it. There's another question here. This is a really good one. Are lead paint grants available through the program for older buildings? Yes. So HPD has an existing lead-based paint abatement and healthy homes program. You would have to submit a grant application to HPD in order to start the process to work on abating the lead through our grant program. Manny, as the Landlord Ambassador, will work with you to put the application together, work with you to get through HPD's due diligence and grant review process, and then help you implement the lead abatement project. So we have another question. Can you elaborate on how you would be able to help property owners with non-paying tenants due to COVID, since we cannot do evictions at this time? So there are actually a number of resources that are starting to come online now for tenants who have been affected by COVID and aren't able to pay their rent. I believe HRA has a program that's being unrolled or unveiled in the next couple weeks. So what Manny would do is work with you to make sure that any residents or tenants in the building that are in arrears and have been affected by COVID would be able to get all of their arrears satisfied through this new HRA program. There are other strategies that Manny, as the Landlord Ambassador, will work with you on to ensure that tenants pay their rent going forward. Sometimes that might be somehow getting Section 8 vouchers into the building, and a number of other strategies. You know, every landlord and every tenant is a little bit different, so they're going to tailor their strategy to that landlord and that tenant. Okay, last call for questions. If you have a question that you haven't presented here in the chat or in the questions box, or if something pops up in the next couple days, feel free to email us at the hpdlap@hpd.nyc.gov email address. We've also shared Roxanne's email address, so feel free to reach out to her as well. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. I hope this was informative and helpful, and we all look toward working with you starting in September. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.